Welcome to Karma Café, the podcast where patience isn't just a virtue, it's a weapon. I'm your host, Makosi McIntosh, and today we have a story that redefines how karma can play the long game. Our story today comes from Linda Harris, CEO of Kali Logistics. 20 years ago, she walked into a job interview desperate, overqualified, and vulnerable. She walked out with a promise, a salary, and what she thought was a partnership. What she actually got was a masterclass in manipulation, systematic sabotage, and betrayal so calculated it took over a decade to fully reveal itself. But here's the thing about Linda, she documented everything. Every conversation. Every stolen idea. Every broken promise. And when the time came, she bought the entire company that had exploited her for exactly $1. So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite coffee. Today I'll be sipping Linda's drink of choice, a cappuccino with extra foam, while I share her story in her own words. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, and make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell for new episodes. And I love hearing from our listeners. Comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from today. I was 42 years old the day I walked into Richard Morrison's corner office and made myself believe in promises I should have known were too good to be true. It was June 2005. My daughter Kaylee had just turned 5, all bright questions and sticky fingers and lungs that betrayed her at the worst possible times: asthma. The kind that required daily controller medications, rescue inhalers in every bag and room, quarterly visits to the pulmonologist, and the occasional terrifying midnight rush to the ER when an attack came on too fast. The daily medications alone cost $340 a month with insurance. Without insurance, over $1,000. The specialist visits, the breathing treatments, the emergency room co-pays, it all added up to a simple, terrifying equation. My daughter's ability to breathe depended on my ability to maintain health insurance. There was no Cobra lapse. No figuring it out later. My bank account held $300 until Friday. My ex-husband's child support checks arrived like comets, irregular, unreliable, and never quite enough to change our trajectory. He traded our marriage for a 23-year-old and a Harley, leaving me with full custody and the kind of sporadic financial support that taught me to never count on anyone for anything. I had a bachelor's degree from Rutgers, summa cum laude. 15 years of logistics and operations experience. I spoke 3 languages. I could optimize a supply chain in my sleep and had saved my previous employer over $2 million through route consolidation alone. And I was applying for a secretary position. The interview at Morrison Logistics was my 9th that month. I'd learned to recognize the shift in interviewers' faces when they saw my resume, the quick calculation behind their eyes that translated experience into expensive and qualified into overqualified. I'd learned to read corporate euphemisms. Looking for fresh energy meant young and cheap. Cultural fit meant they wanted to drink beer after work with people who didn't have to pick up kids from daycare. We're going in a different direction meant they'd already decided before I walked in the room. I was a 42-year-old black woman with a 5-year-old daughter and a resume that scared people. I'd been invisible in the job market for 6 months. Richard Morrison's office was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the logistics yard below, trucks coming and going in choreographed efficiency. The mahogany desk was the size of my kitchen table. Everything in the room whispered a single word: power. Richard Morrison was 37 years old, born into this power, raised on it like mother's milk. His father had built Morrison Logistics from a single truck in 1970 to a regional powerhouse by 2000. Richard had inherited the kingdom at 30 when his father retired to Florida, and he wore that inheritance like expensive cologne, subtle but unmistakable. His handshake was firm. His suit was tailored. His smile was calculated in a way I recognized but chose to ignore. A framed family photo sat on his desk, Richard with a blonde woman and 2 young children, all matching smiles and casual elegance. The photo was angled toward visitors, placed with the same calculated precision as everything else in the room. "You're overqualified," he said, scanning my resume with quick, assessing eyes. Rutgers, summa cum laude. 3 languages. 15 years of logistics experience, including senior analyst positions. He looked up. Why do you want to be my executive assistant? Because my daughter's albuterol inhaler was running low and the refill required insurance authorization. Because the pulmonologist wanted to add a second controller medication and I needed coverage that wouldn't fight me on every prescription. Because single mothers with gaps in their employment history and childcare responsibilities were invisible in a job market that wanted fresh energy and cultural fit. Because I was 42 years old and running out of options and terrified in a way that made my hands shake when I thought about it too long. But I didn't say any of that. I believe in building something meaningful, I said instead, deploying the smile I'd perfected over 9 interviews, warm but not desperate, competent but not threatening. Morrison Logistics has an excellent reputation in the industry. I see this as an opportunity to contribute to a growing company and grow with it. Richard leaned back in his chair, still watching me with those calculating eyes. And then he said something I wasn't expecting. Can I be honest with you, Linda, please? I replied. I don't need a secretary. I need a partner. Someone who understands logistics at a strategic level. Someone who can help me take my father's company and transform it into something that goes public or gets acquired for real money. He paused, and I could feel the hook being baited. My father built a solid regional operation. I want to build an empire. My heart started beating faster. This wasn't the script I prepared for. But here's my problem, Richard continued. I'm 37. The board is full of my father's golf buddies who see me as the kid who used to run around this building during summer breaks. They're not ready to see me bring in a strategic partner with an official title and equity stake. Not yet. He leaned forward, his expression earnest, almost conspiratorial. Like we were in this together. So here's what I'm proposing. Come in as my executive assistant, it's the title that won't ruffle board feathers. But work with me as a real strategic partner. Help me build this company into what it could be. And when we go public or get acquired, you get equity. Real ownership. Not just a salary. I felt something flutter in my chest. Hope, maybe. Or desperation disguised as hope. Why not put it in writing? I asked, and I was proud that my voice stayed steady. Because the board would never approve it right now. They're traditional, conservative. They see executive assistant and think coffee and calendars. They don't understand that the best strategic thinking often comes from people they underestimate. His smile was warm, inclusive. But once you've proven your value, once the growth speaks for itself, then we formalize everything. Then your contribution becomes undeniable. He slid a benefits packet across the desk. In the meantime, you get our Platinum Family Health Plan. No deductibles for pediatric specialists. No prior authorizations for maintenance medications. No lifetime maximums. It's the best coverage available because we need our key people and their families healthy and focused. I looked at the benefits summary. Everything Kaylee needed was covered. Every medication, every specialist visit, every emergency room trip. The monthly cost for family coverage, $0. Fully employer paid. I could feel the cage door opening. I just didn't recognize it as a cage yet. Take the weekend to think about it, Richard said. But Linda, I want you to know, I see what you can do. I see who you are. And I'm not interested in having a secretary. I'm interested in building something remarkable with someone remarkable. I took the weekend. I read the benefits packet 17 times. I calculated what I was spending on Kaylee's medical care versus what I would spend with Morrison's Platinum Plan. I thought about equity in a company that could go public. I thought about being seen as remarkable instead of overqualified. I thought about the word partner. And I thought about the $300 in my bank account and the albuterol refill that needed insurance authorization and the way Kaylee had woken up coughing last Tuesday at 2 in the morning. On Monday, I accepted the position. I walked out of Morrison Logistics with a job offer, benefits that started immediately, and a salary of $55,000 a year, enough to cover rent, daycare, Kaylee's medical needs, and the slow rebuilding of everything the divorce had taken. I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried for 10 minutes, overwhelmed by relief. I thought I'd just secured my future and my daughter's health. I didn't know I'd just walked into a cage built from promises, medical necessity, and my own desperate hope. I didn't know that Richard Morrison had hired me precisely because he recognized my intelligence and my vulnerability, that he'd seen exactly what I needed and exactly how to use it. I didn't know that I'd spend the next 16 years building the key to my own liberation, one documented day at a time. But I would learn. The journal habit started in February 2006, 9 months into the job. I was eating lunch in the break room, a turkey sandwich from home, trying to save money, while Oprah played on the mounted TV. Some productivity expert with perfect teeth was talking about the daily practices of successful people. Document your day, she said, leaning forward with the intensity of someone selling revolution in a book deal. Write down what you did, what worked, what didn't. Your brain will start finding patterns you didn't know existed. Studies show people who journal consistently are 43% more effective at achieving their goals. I thought about my goals. Keep Kaylee healthy. Keep this job. Build toward that equity Richard had promised. Prove myself indispensable so that when the time came to formalize our partnership, it would be undeniable. 43% more effective sounded good. I needed all the effectiveness I could get. That night, I stopped at the drugstore and bought a composition notebook. Not black and white like Kaylee's school notebooks. This one was vibrant purple with a glossy cover. Something that felt intentional, permanent. Like I was taking this seriously. I paid $2.79 for it. That night, after Kaylee was asleep, I opened to the first page and started writing. February 18, 2006. First journal entry. The productivity expert said documentation creates patterns. Here's what I need to document. Today Kay had a small asthma flare, changed weather triggered it. Used rescue inhaler twice. Called pulmonologist's office for advice. Nurse said watch overnight, come in if it gets worse. Didn't get worse, relief. Work, or asked me to analyze the Northeast route inefficiencies. Spent the day reviewing manifests, mapping current routes, identifying consolidation opportunities. Found we're running 3 trucks to Boston weekly that could be consolidated to 2 with better scheduling. Potential savings, $47,000 annually. Presented findings to R at 4:30 p.m. He got excited, that focused energy he gets when he sees the money. Said you're on fire today, Linda. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need. Tomorrow, draft full proposal with implementation timeline. Note to self, keep tracking these projects. This is building the equity case. The patterns emerge faster than I expected. By April 2006, I had a second notebook, this one bright red. By December, I'd filled 4 notebooks in different colors, purple, red, teal, orange. I stored them in my bedroom closet, next to Kaylee's baby photos and my college transcripts. My mother, before she passed, used to keep important documents in a fireproof box. I didn't have a fireproof box, but I had a closet shelf and a growing sense that these notebooks mattered. The journals tracked everything. Kaylee's asthma patterns, which weather changes triggered attacks, which medications worked best, which pulmonologist recommendations actually helped. My work patterns, which types of projects Richard responded to most enthusiastically, which presentations worked, which strategies he implemented. And slowly, a darker pattern began to emerge. June 15, 2007. R presented my Northeast route consolidation strategy to the board this morning. I wasn't in the room. Executive assistants don't attend board meetings, but he told me about it after. They loved it, he said. Thomas Williams said it was exactly the kind of innovative thinking the company needs to stay competitive. Said I'm showing the strategic vision my father always hoped I'd develop. My strategy. My analysis. My 3 months of work. His vision. I waited for him to mention me. To say Linda developed this or even my team identified this opportunity. He didn't. He talked about the implementation timeline like he created it himself. When I asked if he'd mentioned my contribution, he said, Linda, you have to understand board politics. These men are traditional. If I told them my secretary developed this strategy, they'd question my competence. But once we have enough wins like this, once we go public, then we show them everything you've done. Then your equity stake proves your value. He smiled. Besides, you did this work for the company, not for recognition. We're building something together, remember? I said I understood. I do understand. Partnership means sometimes the credit goes to the public face while the real work happens behind the scenes. That's how building something works. But I'm documenting this anyway. When we formalize the equity, this pattern will matter. Note to self, keep detailed records of project outcomes, financial impact, strategic decisions. The numbers don't lie. By 2008, the pattern was undeniable. I would identify inefficiency, develop strategy, create implementation plans. Richard would present to the board, take full credit, receive praise for his innovative leadership. Then he'd thank me privately, remind me we were building something together, and reassure me that it would matter when equity time came. So I documented obsessively. Every project, every outcome, every promise. March 3, 2008. 3 years at Morrison Logistics today. I now have 12 journals, all different vibrant colors, all filled with documentation. Projects I've led that are presented as his own. Northeast Route Consolidation, $47,000 annual savings, warehouse redesign for efficiency, 40% improvement in load times, customer retention program, estimated $890,000 in recurring revenue, fleet maintenance optimization, $127,000 annual savings, cross-docking strategy for perishables, open new client segment. Total documented value I've created, $324,000 in annual recurring savings, plus the client retention revenue, estimated $890,000 annually. R gave me a card today for my 3-year anniversary. Inside, $100 Visa gift card and a note saying thank you for your dedication and hard work. 3 years of strategic work that's generated over $1 million in value. $100 gift card. But this is part of the plan. Build now, get rewarded later. Partnership requires patience. Kay's asthma has been stable for 6 months, the new medication protocol is working. The Platinum insurance covered everything without question. This job is keeping her healthy. That matters more than recognition. Note to self, R mentioned yesterday that he's thinking about bringing on a junior logistics coordinator. Someone to help with day-to-day operations so I can focus on higher-level strategic work. This sounds like good progress toward formalizing my role. Nikki Nolan arrived at Morrison Logistics as the new junior logistics coordinator in September 2008, 25 years old and polished in a way that screamed money I didn't have. Silk blouse, tailored jeans, expensive leather boots. I'd spent 3 years at Morrison learning to read details, and the details said, family safety nets, paid off student loans, no midnight calculations about whether to buy groceries or asthma medication. Richard introduced us in the break room. Linda, this is Nikki Nolan, our new junior logistics coordinator. Nikki, this is Linda Harris, she's my executive assistant, but really, she runs this place. Nikki's smile was warm, her handshake firm. It's so nice to meet you. Richards told me you're basically the secret weapon here. I liked her immediately. We had lunch that first week, her suggestion. She was smart, asked good questions, actually listened. Executive assistant seems like an interesting role for someone with your background, she said casually. I saw your resume, 15 years of logistics experience? Senior analyst positions. That's impressive. I appreciated that she'd acknowledged it. I'm playing the long game. Building towards something bigger. That's really admirable. Most people wouldn't have the patience. By October, lunch twice weekly. By December, occasional drinks. By January 2009, Nikki had become something I hadn't had in years, a friend. She brought soup when Kaylee had an asthma flare. Showed up to piano recitals and sat through 45 minutes of elementary school kids butchering Mozart. Offered to babysit so I could interview candidates for a new sitter, then refused payment. She became Auntie Nikki to Kaylee. Remembered favorite cookies. Asked about piano practice and actually listened. I'm grateful for Nikki. Every lunch, every shared eye roll when Richard makes an impossible demand, every text checking in after a hard day. For the first time in years, someone at work actually sees me, not just as an employee, but as a person. A mother. A friend. It makes the job bearable. I started confiding in her. About Richard taking credit for my work. About feeling invisible despite being essential. About hoping the equity promise would materialize but fearing it wouldn't. Nikki was always supportive. You deserve so much more recognition. That warehouse redesign saved the company hundreds of thousands. Richard's lucky to have you. He says when we go public, my contribution will be undeniable. When do you think that'll be? Another 3 to 5 years. Once we hit certain revenue benchmarks. Nikki would smile, genuine warmth in her voice. You're playing the long game, and that's smart. I've watched you, you're brilliant at what you do. Patient, strategic, always 3 steps ahead. People like you don't stay invisible forever. Your moment is coming. I really believe that. By 2010, 5 years at Morrison, Nikki got promoted to Associate Logistics Coordinator after 18 months. My title hadn't changed. When I asked Richard about equity timelines, he took me to that expensive Italian place. The board's more conservative than I hoped, he said. But we have a plan. Your strategies have saved us over $600,000 annually. The warehouse redesign improved efficiency by 40%. You've added nearly $2 million in recurring revenue. He leaned forward conspiratorially. These are your wins, Linda. But the board doesn't know it's you. They think it's me. And that's strategic. If I tell them my secretary developed all these innovations, they question my competence. But if I continue taking credit now, build my reputation, get us to IPO, then reward you with significant equity, that looks like generous leadership. It made a sick kind of sense. How long? 2 more years. Maybe 3. 5% equity. At our projected valuation, that's $8 to $10 million, Linda. Life-changing money. $8 to $10 million. Kaylee's college funded. No more medication worries. Financial security I never had. 2 to 3 more years. But I was starting to get interview requests. LinkedIn messages, recruiter emails. My experience, even buried under executive assistant, was visible to people who knew how to read between the lines. I mentioned them casually to Nikki. You should explore it. Know your market value, she'd say. But something felt disloyal. Richard's equity promise had to be worth more than these opportunities. I declined the first 3. Then came a fourth, VP of Strategic Operations, $140,000 to $180,000, equity package. More than double my Morrison salary. I showed Nikki the message. Linda, that's huge. You should at least take the conversation. I can't leave Morrison. Richard and I have an agreement. An agreement that's kept you at executive assistant level for 5 years while you do director work. Her voice was gentle. I'm not saying leave. Just know your value. But I told Richard about it, transparency. He was genuinely enthusiastic at first, then serious. If you really want to leave, I'd give you a glowing reference. But you'd be walking away from over $10 million. We're so close now. 18 months, maybe 2 years. I felt terrible for even entertaining the recruiter. By early 2011, I'd declined 7 opportunities. Each time, I'd tell Nikki. Each time, Richard would express gratitude for my loyalty. Then in March 2011, I applied to a position without telling anyone. Senior Operations Analyst, fully remote, perfect for Kaylee's needs. The hiring manager was Sarah Martinez, warm, intelligent, a single mother herself. The interview went perfectly. 45 minutes where I talked about my work as mine for the first time in 6 years. You'd be reporting to me as head of regional operations, Sarah said. Remote position. $135,000 to $155,000 plus benefits. I'm excited about this. I think we build something really special together. Then, standard procedure, we need reference checks. Would Richard Morrison be appropriate? My stomach clenched. Yes, he can speak to my work. A week passed. Then 2. Then 3. Finally, the email. After careful consideration and completion of our reference checks, we've decided to move forward with other candidates. The interview had gone perfectly. Sarah had been enthusiastic. Hadn't she? Or had I imagined the connection, desperate to see warmth where there was only politeness? Maybe I talked too much about Morrison Logistics, made myself sound too entrenched in one company. Maybe there was someone better, someone without a gap in their resume, someone who didn't have to explain why they'd been a secretary for the past 6 years. What had changed? Completion of our reference checks. I stopped applying after that. Convinced myself Richard's equity promise was worth more than any opportunity. Convinced myself the problem was me. But I documented everything. Every declining request. Every promise. Every delay. June 15, 2011, 6 years at Morrison. No equity. No title change. Richard gave me a $2,000 bonus for exceptional support. Nikki got promoted again. Logistics coordinator, no junior modifier. 3 years at Morrison, already advancing. I'd been there 6 years doing director-level work, still an executive assistant. Kaylee asked why I looked sad. I said I was tired. You're always tired, Mama. She was right. Patience became my religion. Every journal entry ended with stay patient or trust the plan. And Nikki was always there, supportive and understanding, listening to every frustration. The online business law course appeared in my inbox as a targeted ad in September 2013. Understanding corporate structures, from formation to IPO 12 weeks, Tuesday and Thursday evenings, completely virtual, $299. $300 was groceries for 2 weeks. It was Kaylee's piano lessons. But it was also knowledge, understanding, power. If Richard and I were truly partners building toward IPO, I should understand the mechanics. How equity actually gets distributed. What protections existed for strategic partners whose contributions weren't formally recognized. That's what I told myself. But deeper down, I wanted verification. Proof that what Richard had been promising for 8 years was actually possible. I enrolled before I could talk myself out of it. Week 1. The instructor, Dr. Mary Jones, former corporate attorney, 20 years structuring deals, had a dark sense of humor about corporate malfeasance. Week 5, we'll cover how founders dilute early contributors, she said during the first class. Someone does foundational work under a promise of equity, then discovers their 5% has become 0.5%, or the company's been restructured to make their shares worthless. My stomach tightened. In the absence of written agreements, power belongs to whoever controls the paperwork. Verbal promises are worth exactly what they're written on, nothing. Week 3. Someone posted a case study about verbal equity agreements and legal standing. I posted my first comment: what kind of documentation would be considered contemporaneous and credible? Another user, FDelaney_NYC, responded: daily journals, project logs, emails created at the time events occurred. The key is showing a consistent pattern, not something created after the dispute started. We started a private conversation. The new message appeared in the chat. Your question seems specific. Personal? I swallowed hard and typed, personal. But hypothetical, mostly. The response was immediate. I'm Frank Delaney. Ex-NYPD, Corporate Fraud Division. Now private investigator. These situations usually don't end well for the person waiting for equity. Why not? Because the person making the promise has all the power. The person waiting has only their labor and their hope. And hope isn't a contract. I stared at those words. 8 years I'd been running on labor and hope, working like a partner while being paid like an employee, believing promises that were never written down. What if the person has 8 years of documentation? I typed. His response was measured. Then they have evidence. Whether it's enough depends on whether they can prove detrimental reliance. But it's better than most people have. Can I ask what company? The cursor blinked. This was the line. Cross it and I was no longer a hypothetical case study. I typed, Morrison Logistics. I'm the hypothetical colleague. The pause felt eternal. Then, Morrison Logistics in New Jersey. Richard Morrison's company? My heart beat faster. You know it? What Frank wrote next changed everything. I investigated the company in 1998. Securities fraud case. Richard's father was inflating projections, cooking books. We had a solid case. Then my captain killed it. Politics, donations. Case disappeared. Another message appeared. Richard was in those meetings, learning the family business. He knew what his father was doing. Sat there taking notes while his father explained how to make the books look good. Then, if he's making verbal equity promises he's not formalizing, I'm not surprised. He learned from a master manipulator. I felt cold spread through my body. Richard hadn't just made empty promises. He'd learned how to make them from his father, learned that words without paper were just air, and air costs nothing. What should I do? I typed, my hands shaking. Frank's final message was both practical and damning. Document everything. But also, start building an exit strategy. Because men who learn corporate manipulation from their fathers don't suddenly become honest partners. Study sessions became coffee conversations. Frank Delaney was 38, Brooklyn accent, wore Henleys that stretched around arms built from real work rather than gyms. He'd left NYPD at 29 when cases he built got buried for political reasons. Divorced 3 years ago after realizing he and his high school sweetheart had grown into different people. He was handsome in an interesting way, strong jaw, dark hair silvering at the temples, intense eyes that missed nothing. And he listened like my words mattered. Our conversations happened twice a week through winter 2013. Corporate structures became life stories. His struggle building a PI business. My juggling Kaylee's piano practice with work. My growing unease about Richard's delays. It's been 9 years, I said one evening in March 2014. He keeps saying soon. After the next board meeting. Once we hit revenue targets. But there's always another reason. Have you asked for it in writing? He says it would spook the board. Make them think I don't trust him. But he reminds me we're so close to IPO, and I'd be walking away from millions. That's manipulation, Linda. Using FOMO and guilt to keep you in place. By summer 2014, Frank told me about believing in justice and learning it had a price tag. I told him about the exhaustion of single motherhood. About being essential at work but invisible. About convincing myself nobody wanted a single woman with a teenager. You're remarkable, Frank said one evening, his voice serious. I laughed, uncomfortable. You're kind. I'm honest. You analyze problems with clarity most people never develop. I'm wondering if you'd be interested in having dinner sometime. In person. As a date. My breath caught. Frank, I'm older than you. What, a year or two? 13 years. I'm 51. I don't care. I'd like to take you to dinner. Our first date was September 2014. Small Italian restaurant in Hoboken. 3 hours of conversation. When he walked me to my car, he kissed me in a way that made me feel 51 and 25 simultaneously. By October, we were serious. Frank would visit on weekends, have dinner, watch Kaylee practice piano. He was respectful with her, didn't try to be her father, just showed genuine interest. He's good, Kaylee told me. Better than the guys you dated before. Frank's actually nice to you. Not nice because he wants something. Just nice. She was right. Frank listened instead of waiting his turn. He asked what I needed instead of assuming. He treated me like a partner. By late 2014, I told Nikki about Frank. We met for drinks in November. Nikki arrived 20 minutes late, buzzed from day drinking. Private investigator, right? She said to Frank. That's so sexy, I mean, cool. When I excused myself to the restroom, something shifted. I returned to find Nikki leaning forward, her hand near Frank's on the table, her voice suggestive. I slid back into the booth. Did I miss anything? Just getting to know Frank, Nikki said brightly, instantly casual again, like flipping a switch. In the car later, Frank was quiet. Your friend is interesting, Nikki. She's been really supportive. She's also interested in more than friendship. When you went to the bathroom, she asked if I was seeing anyone seriously. Asked if I'd want to get drinks sometime, just us. When I said I was happy in my current relationship, she laughed it off. But it wasn't friendly. Maybe she was just drunk, maybe. Just be careful what you share with her. That kind of control, switching personalities that quickly, that's practiced. The friendship shifted. Nikki was still warm, but there was an edge now. Small comments about age differences, pointed questions about whether Frank and I were really compatible long term. I started noticing other things. How often Nikki was in closed-door meetings with Richard. How she'd been promoted to senior logistics coordinator in just 6 years. When a recruiter from Henderson Analytics contacted me, I mentioned it casually to Nikki at lunch. 2 days later, Richard called me in. I heard Henderson Analytics might reach out. If you want to explore it. But we're so close to IPO now, Linda. You'd be walking away from millions. How did he know? I'd only told Nikki. By spring 2015, I'd stopped confiding in her. We still had lunch, but I was guarded now. Frank and I had gotten serious. In February, he proposed quietly while I was making dinner. Would you want to make this permanent? Get married? I turned, spatula in hand. Yes. He laughed, picked me up, kissed me like we were teenagers instead of 52 and 39. Kaylee walked in, said finally, and went back to practicing piano. I didn't tell Nikki about the engagement. Some instinct told me to keep this private, protected from whatever dynamics I didn't fully understand. That instinct would prove correct. Because 3 weeks later, on March 17, 2015, I would discover that everything I thought I knew about Morrison Logistics was a carefully constructed lie. And the discovery would happen because corporate Skype systems have vulnerabilities. Calls can bleed through if the wiring crosses wrong. That vulnerability was about to destroy the cage I'd been living in for 10 years. March 17, 2015. The day everything changed. I was working from home in my kitchen on a Skype call with potential clients from Marseille. Morrison had been pursuing this European logistics contract for months, and I'd been managing the relationship. The clients were 6 hours ahead, which meant my 3 p.m. call overlapped with Richard's late afternoon meeting. My laptop screen showed 3 faces from the French company's logistics team. We were discussing route optimization for transatlantic shipping. As you can see from the data, I said, sharing my screen, consolidating your Newark and Boston terminals would reduce operational costs by roughly 18% annually. Then I heard it. Not through my headphones. Through my computer speakers. Audio bleeding through from somewhere else on Morrison's network. Richard's voice, suddenly clear. Does Linda suspect anything? I froze. My hand moved automatically to my phone. Started the voice recorder. Set it next to my laptop speaker. Nikki's laugh, sharp and bright. Linda. God, no. She thinks we're best friends. Has no idea about us. I muted my microphone and turned off my camera. How long do you think we can keep this going? Richard's voice drifted through the audio bleed. As long as we need to, Nikki answered. She's so focused on that community college boyfriend and her fantasy equity shares that she doesn't notice anything else. The word stabbed. Community college boyfriend. Frank had attended CUNY, not that it mattered, but they were using it as a weapon. Frank Delaney, Richard said, amusement clear. The ex-cop with the hero complex. You think Linda suspects? That we've been together since before I started at Morrison's? Nikki laughed. No way. Linda's completely convinced I'm her loyal friend. She tells me everything. Everything. Every confidence I'd shared over lunch. Every doubt. Every job opportunity I'd mentioned. She collected them all like ammunition. And the job applications? Richard asked. You're still tracking those? Every single one. Nikki's voice carried pride. She mentioned that Henderson Analytics recruiter last month. I told you immediately. You called her in, did your thing about loyalty and equity. She backed down completely. I thought he was perceptive. He wasn't. He had an informant. Perfect, Richard said. The reference game is working beautifully. I position everything as technically accurate, works better in support roles, family obligations sometimes affect availability, nothing actionable, nothing she can prove is false. But every company hears it and decides she's not leadership material. My hands went cold. Sarah Martinez. The interview that had felt hopeful. Then silence. Then rejection. Not bad luck, sabotage. How many has she applied to over the years? Nikki asked. Richard paused. 10? 12? Every single one, dead on arrival after the reference check. She probably thinks she's just unlucky. Doesn't realize I'm systematically killing every opportunity that comes her way. 12 jobs. 12 futures. All murdered before they could take their first breath. That's cold, Richard. But Nikki's tone held admiration. That's strategic, Richard said. Linda Harris is the best operations mind I've ever worked with. Why would I let a competitor have her? Why would I let her leave when she's generating millions in value for a fraction of what I'd have to pay a real VP? He knew exactly what I was worth. He just had no intention of paying it. The equity promise keeps her motivated, Nikki observed. The equity promise keeps her trapped, Richard corrected. She's invested 10 years now, too much sunk cost to walk away. And the beauty is, when we finally go public, I'll give her just enough equity that she can't claim I lied. 0.25%, maybe. Enough to make her feel acknowledged, not enough to actually matter. The number hit like a physical blow. 0.25%. Not 5%. Not the $8 to $10 million I calculated. 0.25% would be maybe $400,000. A tip for a decade of building his company. What about after IPO? Nikki asked. Won't she realize she got screwed? What's she going to do? Richard's confidence was absolute. Sue? She has nothing in writing. And I'll have my lawyers draft the equity agreement in a way that makes 0.25% seem generous, recognition of exceptional administrative support or some similar language. Administrative support. I'd built supply chains across 3 countries. I'd negotiated million-dollar contracts. I'd saved the company from bankruptcy twice when Richard had ignored my warnings and made reckless decisions. God, you're devious, Nikki said, warmth in her voice. I learned from the best, Richard replied. My father built this company on understanding leverage. Linda needs health insurance for her kids' asthma. She needs stable income. She's too old to get hired elsewhere at her salary level, especially after I've spent 10 years poisoning her references. She's trapped, and she doesn't even know the cage is locked, he laughed. The cage is locked. My daughter's health, my need for stability, my age, his poisoned references, all of it weaponized. I wasn't a partner being groomed for leadership. I was a resource being exploited. The French clients finished speaking. One addressed me directly. I apologize, I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. Could you repeat that? Audio cut out briefly. I finished the call somehow. 17 minutes of professional competence while my phone recorded 17 minutes of casual betrayal. When the call ended, I sat staring at my phone's voice recorder. 17 minutes, 43 seconds. I played it back. Heard it all again. Richard and Nikki discussing their relationship. My systematic blackballing. My community college boyfriend. My fantasy equity shares. Heard Richard admit he was planning to give me 0.25% instead of 5%. Heard him call me too old to get hired elsewhere. Heard him describe me as trapped in a cage I didn't know was locked. Heard Nikki, Auntie Nikki who brought soup when Kaylee was sick, laugh about how I told her everything. I should have felt rage. Instead, I felt cold, analytical, clinical. My brain had shifted into emergency operational mode where emotion was a luxury I couldn't afford. I downloaded the audio file. Saved it in 3 different places, cloud storage, external hard drive, and emailed it to myself with the timestamp preserved. Then I forwarded it to a second email account I created on the spot, Evidence. Then I called Frank. Hey, he answered, voice warm. How'd the French call go? I need you to come over now. I need you to hear something. The warmth left his voice immediately. What happened? The Skype system had a glitch. Richard's call bled through to my speakers during my client meeting. My voice wobbled. Silence. Then, I'm leaving now. I'll be there in 25 minutes. He was there in 18 minutes. I played the audio file once, watching Frank's face shift from confusion to understanding to cold fury. 17 minutes, he finally said, voice controlled but dangerous. They gave you 17 minutes of confession, motive, conspiracy, and intent. Most investigators spend years trying to get this kind of evidence. They didn't know I could hear them. Technical failure becomes your tactical advantage. Frank ran his hand through his hair. Linda, this changes everything. Tortious interference, deliberately sabotaging your employment opportunities. Promissory estoppel, you relied on his promises to your detriment. Conspiracy between him and Nikki to keep you trapped. He pulled out his phone, started taking notes. We need to document exactly what's on this recording. Then we build the full picture. What do you mean? This recording proves they're manipulating you. But to really destroy them, we need systematic patterns. Documentation from companies showing what Richard said. Your journals showing consistent promises over years. Proof your ideas generated the value they're taking credit for. God, I said, voice cracking. Nikki was in my home. With my daughter. And the whole time. Hey! Frank took my hands. I need to start my own company, I said. I've been building Morrison for 10 years, every system, every client relationship. I know this business better than Richard does. Frank's expression was careful. That's viable, but there's a non-compete in my contract. The realization landed like a door slamming. Do you know the terms? I shook my head. I signed it 10 years ago when I was desperate for health insurance. We need to find it. I pulled out the folder marked Morrison Logistics, Employment. The contract was near the bottom. Frank read it methodically. Finally, 2-year non-compete within a 100-mile radius, specific to operations consulting in logistics and supply chain management. So I'm trapped for 2 more years after I leave. After you leave, Frank emphasized. The non-compete restricts what you can do post-employment. It doesn't prevent you from building infrastructure while you're still employed, as long as you're not actively competing. My mind started working. So I could incorporate a consulting company now. Set up the legal structure, build the website, take on clients in different industries or different geographic markets. Exactly. You build the foundation while they think you're still their loyal operations manager. Then when you're ready to leave, when you have enough clients and revenue to survive the 2-year non-compete period, you walk. I'd need to be careful. Can't let Nikki find out. Can't leave any digital trail Richard could discover. And you keep playing the role, Frank said. Tomorrow you go back to work. Still Linda, still loyal. But you're documenting every conversation, every betrayal. And you're building something they can't see. I looked at the employment contract. For 10 years, I'd seen it as a cage. But maybe it was just a wall, and I'd been too tired to look for the door. I can do this, I said. Frank met my eyes. I know. You're 52 years old. You're brilliant, strategic, and you've been generating millions in value for a company that refuses to pay you what you're worth. You're not too old to start over. You're just getting started. And Nikki's been facilitating everything. She's as culpable as he is. Maybe more, because she weaponized intimacy. I want her to pay too, I said. She will, Frank promised. But first, we build the case. We document everything. We let them think they're winning while you build something they can't take away. And when the time comes, you show them exactly how trapped they actually are. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. Smiled at Nikki when she stopped by my desk. Took Richard's coffee order at 8:02 a.m. like always. But that evening, after Kaylee went to bed, I started researching business incorporation. By midnight, I had a name picked out. Kali Solutions. Kali, the Hindu goddess of time, change, destruction, and power. The fierce protector who destroys evil and ego to make way for transformation. I'd been patient for 10 years. Waiting for Richard's promises. Being on fire with ideas he'd steal while calling me his secret weapon. Now I would become time itself. Patient but unstoppable. Destructive but transformative. And when enough time passed, when I had enough evidence, enough leverage, enough power, time would run out for Richard Morrison and Nikki Nolan. Because time conquers everything. And I am Kali. The Saturday after I discovered the betrayal, I met Frank at a coffee shop in Hoboken. He brought a corporate attorney named Marcus Chin who specialized in business formation and employment law. Your non-compete restricts operations consulting in logistics within a 100-mile radius for 2 years after termination, Marcus said, sliding papers across the table. Key words, After termination. Right now, you're employed. You can build a legal entity and take on clients as long as you're not directly competing with Morrison's client base. Morrison focuses on Fortune 500 companies and major manufacturers. You focus on small businesses, specialized freight, niche markets they ignore. No client overlap means no competition. I felt something loosen in my chest. So I can start now. I've drafted formation papers. Wyoming LLC, better privacy protections. The company is called Kali Solutions, as you requested. Frank looked at me. Why Kali? Hindu goddess of time, change, destruction, power, I said. She destroys evil and ego to make way for transformation. And Kali comes from Kala, time. The ultimate force that conquers everything. I've been patient for 10 years, I said. Now is my time. How much time can you dedicate? Frank asked. I thought about my schedule. Kaylee was 15 now, more independent. 20 hours a week. Evenings, weekends, early mornings. Marcus pulled out a calculator. To walk away safely, you'd need enough revenue to cover living expenses plus a cushion. At 20 hours a week, starting from zero? 4 to 6 years, but it all depends on well the company does. Or, Marcus said, confront them now. Negotiate a settlement. Maybe a year's salary. I thought about Richard's voice. She's trapped, and she doesn't even know the cage is locked. No. I'm building something he can't touch. Even if it takes 6 years. You'll need to be careful, Marcus warned. Separate everything. One slip and they'll know. I can do it. I know how to move without being seen. Marcus gathered the papers. Richard has been sabotaging your job applications, that's tortious interference. Combined with promissory estoppel and potential IP claims, you've got multiple causes of action. But build your success first. Then you're not a disgruntled employee. You're a successful CEO with evidence of systematic sabotage. I signed the papers, my handwriting steady. When do you tell Richard you're leaving? Frank asked. Not for 6 years. I go back Monday like nothing happened. Still loyal, Linda. But I'm building something they can't see. Frank squeezed my hand. If anyone can do this, it's you. I'm not just building a business, I said. I'm becoming time itself, patient, inevitable. And in 6 years, time runs out for Richard Morrison. The incorporation papers filed on March 23, 2015. Kali Solutions, LLC officially existed. The first client came in May, a small trucking company struggling with route inefficiencies. I analyzed their routes, reduced their costs by 22%. They paid me $8,000. I sat in my car after depositing that check and cried. Not sad crying. Relieved crying. The kind that happens when you realize you're not actually trapped. By the end of summer 2015, Kali Solutions had 3 clients. By the end of fall, 6. I was working 60-hour weeks, 40 for Morrison, 20 for Kali. And all the while, I maintained perfect performance at Morrison. Richard's coffee at 8 a.m. Strategies he'd steal. Lunch with Nikki twice a week, who kept pretending to be my friend while reporting everything to Richard. But now I was careful about what I shared. I talked about Kaylee's piano progress. Eventually I showed Nikki the engagement ring Frank had bought and let her squeal with manufactured happiness. I didn't mention Kali Solutions. That was mine, protected, hidden. The next 2 years were a study in controlled duplicity. At Morrison, I was the perfect executive assistant. I watched Nikki get promoted, again. By 2017, she was Director of Operations Planning. 8 years at Morrison, already in senior management, making probably $130,000. I'd been there 12 years and was still an executive assistant at $55,000 plus inflation. It's just optics, Richard explained. When we go public and Linda, we're so close now, your equity makes all of that irrelevant. The IPO timeline kept shifting. I documented every promise, every shifting timeline, every reason for delay. And I built Kali Solutions. By 2017, I had 18 clients and $180,000 revenue. I expanded into cold chain logistics, specialized temperature-controlled freight for pharmaceutical and food companies. Markets Morrison didn't serve. Frank and I married quietly in November. Nikki was appropriately enthusiastic. She had no idea Frank had been building a case against Richard for 2 years. That he'd contacted 8 companies I'd applied to, obtained hiring files from 5 showing exactly what Richard said in references. Adequate but not exceptional performance. Family obligations that sometimes impact availability. Better suited for support roles. All technically defensible. All systematically poisonous. But Morrison wasn't falling. Through 2017 and 2018, the company thrived. Richard's stolen strategies I'd come up with, were generating real growth. Then in June 2018, I found something that made my blood run cold. Richard had set up a company called RDM Strategic Solutions at his home address. He was billing Morrison for consulting services he was providing to himself, embezzlement. I checked further back. RDM had been billing Morrison for 2 years. Total, $340,000. I documented everything. By late 2018, I'd found over $800,000 in embezzlement through various shell companies. He's stealing from his own company, Frank said, reviewing the documentation. Classic self-dealing. Combined with everything else? This paints a picture of someone fundamentally corrupt. We wait. You keep documenting. And when the moment comes, we strike. By 2018, Kali Solutions had 27 clients and $420,000 revenue. I hired Sarah Martinez, the woman from that 2011 interview, as part-time consultant. Kaylee got accepted to Harvard. Full ride. When she asked how I managed college savings, I told her about Kali Solutions. She said, "Mama, you've been building an escape plan for 3 years?" I said, "I've been building proof that your mother isn't the person Richard Morrison tried to convince everyone I was." Then COVID-19 arrived. Morrison should have thrived. Instead, it started hemorrhaging money. Because Richard, in late 2019, became convinced e-commerce growth was temporary. He locked Morrison into long-term contracts with traditional retail companies. Then COVID hit. Retail stores closed. Morrison ran half-empty trucks on guaranteed routes to shuttered locations. Every logistics company in America was printing money. Except Morrison's. Meanwhile, Kali Solutions thrived. Small businesses pivoting to online sales needed logistics support desperately. We added 15 clients in 2 months. Revenue projected at $890,000 for 2020. Sarah Martinez joined full-time as COO. She told me, "You interviewed with me 9 years ago. I knew you were special. Then Richard gave a reference that made you sound unreliable. I've regretted not pushing back for 9 years. Let's build something real together." Through 2020, Morrison hemorrhaged money while Kali thrived. Richard made increasingly desperate decisions: high-interest debt, cutting corners on maintenance, laying off experienced drivers. I watched him make every wrong decision while I documented each one. And said nothing. By early 2021, Morrison was losing $2 million monthly. Richard had taken personal loans against his house. Then Richard discovered Bitcoin. Bitcoin was at $47,000. Up from $10,000 6 months ago. Classic bubble behavior. Everyone who understood market dynamics said it would crash. Richard was going to invest everything at the peak. Richard called me into his office. He wanted documentation for the board. He was proposing a $40 million investment in Bitcoin. He asked me to prepare a brief highlighting Bitcoin's growth, institutional adoption, inflation hedge argument. Make it compelling, he said. I asked what scope he wanted for risk analysis. Keep it balanced. But I don't want to bury the opportunity under excessive caution. I prepared exactly what he asked for. 10 pages. 6 pages of bullish projections. Then pages 7 and 8, 2 full pages of risk analysis, volatility, regulatory uncertainty, historical bubble patterns, concentration risk. All factually accurate. All thoroughly buried after 6 pages of optimistic projections. The board approved it. $30 million in company funds. Richard added $10 million of personal funds, Borrowed against his house, his portfolio, everything. $40 million into Bitcoin at $58,000 per coin. Bitcoin peaked at $64,000 on April 14, 2021. Richard was ecstatic. Then the crash came. May 12, Bitcoin dropped to $50,000. May 19, $42,000. May 23, $35,000. Richard's consultants advised holding. Diamond hands. The fundamentals haven't changed. By June 20th, Bitcoin was at $32,000. The $40 million investment was now worth $22 million. $18 million had evaporated. Morrison's emergency board meeting. The Bitcoin investment had lost $18 million. I waited in the corridor outside the conference room, sitting on the bench by the window. The voices inside were loud enough to carry through the door. I heard Richard trying to pitch holding until recovery. The board shutting him down. They were selling. Taking the loss. Then, $847,000? Someone shouted. Shell companies. Richard, this is embezzlement. You're removed as CEO effective immediately. The company is filing for bankruptcy. I heard Nikki's voice, high and panicked, then crying. She'd been his biggest supporter. The door burst open. Richard walked out first, his face gray, his shoulders slumped. He didn't look at me. Just walked past like I was invisible. Nikki followed moments later, mascara running, sobbing. She glanced at me briefly, then hurried toward the exit. Then the door opened and Thomas Williams stepped out into the corridor. Linda, he said, we need you to stay on during bankruptcy proceedings. You're the only person who knows how everything actually works. Would you be willing to serve as interim operations director? Interim operations director. After 16 years, they were finally giving me a title that matched what I'd been doing. I'll accept on one condition, I said. I need to disclose something. I've been building a consulting company, Kali Solutions, for the past 6 years. If Morrison goes up for sale, I intend to submit a bid. That creates a conflict of interest. I'll need to recuse myself from any sale-related decisions, and the board should appoint independent counsel to handle the transaction. Thomas's eyebrows rose. You've been running a separate business? For 6 years. Different markets, different clients, no overlap with Morrison's operations. It's completely legal under my employment contract. But if I'm going to manage this bankruptcy while also preparing to bid, full transparency is required. Thomas was quiet for a moment. I need to take this back to the board. Wait here. He went back into the conference room. I stayed in the corridor, standing now, looking out the window at the logistics yard below. 20 minutes passed. The door opened again. Thomas stepped back out. We accept your terms, he said. You'll manage operations through bankruptcy. We'll appoint Matthew Blackmore as independent transaction counsel to handle the sale process. You'll recuse yourself from all acquisition-related decisions. And when bids come in, the bankruptcy court will determine the winner based on maximum value to creditors. Understood, I said. One more thing, Thomas added. Your disclosure changes nothing about your value to this company. You've kept us alive through this crisis. Whatever happens with the sale, we're grateful. I nodded. Because I was going to manage the dissolution of Morrison Logistics, maintain its value, and then compete fairly to buy it. Time has conquered. Now comes the reckoning. By July 2021, Morrison Logistics was in Chapter 11, restructuring with intent to sell. Richard was gone, removed, disgraced, facing embezzlement charges. His lawyers were negotiating a plea deal. His wife Catherine filed for divorce. His personal bankruptcy filing showed zero recoverable assets. The man who'd stolen 16 years of my labor and $847,000 from his company now had nothing. Nikki was also gone. Her relationship with Richard became public during the investigation. The board felt her judgment was compromised. She took a severance package and moved to Ohio 3 weeks later. I never spoke to her again. I ran Morrison through bankruptcy, kept clients happy, maintained operations, preserved jobs. But I stayed away from anything related to the sale. That was Matthew Blackmore's domain now, and he ran a clean process. He solicited bids from 7 potential buyers, sent detailed information packets, conducted site visits, answered questions. Everything transparent, everything documented, everything designed to withstand bankruptcy court scrutiny. Kali Solutions submitted our bid on September 1, 2021. A detailed 30-page proposal that Frank, Marcus, and a team of consultants helped prepare. Kali Solutions would acquire all Morrison Logistics operational assets, the truck fleet, 3 warehouses, all client contracts, the Morrison name and intellectual property, for $1 plus assumption of $5 million in specific debts, the legitimate operational debts, vendor contracts, equipment financing, and client obligations, not the Bitcoin losses or embezzlement liabilities, and legally binding commitments to retain 80% of staff, honor all contracts, and maintain operational standards. $1 plus $5 million in liabilities. 3 years ago, Morrison Logistics had been valued at $200 million. The company had been operating for 51 years. Richard's father had founded it in 1970. But when I joined in 2005, it had been valued at $47 million. Over my 16 years, I'd implemented the supply chain optimizations, the client retention systems, the operational efficiencies that had taken it from $47 million to $200 million. My work had added $153 million in value. Then Richard had destroyed all of it in 36 months through Bitcoin losses, embezzlement, and catastrophically bad judgment. What remained was worth exactly what I was offering, $1 for the shell, plus the operational debts that kept it functioning. But I knew what this company could become again. I'd proven I could add over $100 million in value once. I could do it again. The structure wasn't unusual in bankruptcy. When a company has more debt than assets, the symbolic purchase price reflects that reality. The real value to creditors came from assuming the operational debts and maintaining the business as a going concern. 3 other companies submitted bids. 2 offered asset purchases, cherry-picking the profitable parts, liquidating the rest. 1 offered $500,000 cash but no debt assumption and no job guarantees. Matthew Blackmore prepared a detailed analysis for the board and bankruptcy court. His recommendation, Kali Solutions bid maximize value to creditors, preserve jobs, and maintain operational continuity. The structure was called a fire sale. When a company's burning and someone offers to buy it before it collapses, they call it a fire sale. Richard used to say I was on fire when I had great ideas he'd steal. Now I was buying his company through a fire sale. The poetry wasn't lost on me. The board meeting was September 15, 2021. I presented the offer in the same conference room where I'd sat for 16 years taking notes while men took credit for my ideas. Except this time, I stood at the head of the table where Richard used to stand. And this time, I was presenting my own vision. I recused myself from the vote. But before I left the room, they asked me to explain Kali's operational plan. I showed Kali's financials, growth trajectory, client retention rates, profitability metrics. Explained our operational capacity, staff expertise, market positioning. Detailed the transition plan, how we'd integrate Morrison's operations, retain employees, maintain client relationships. I was professional, thorough, comprehensive. This wasn't emotion. This was business. Richard was there. The board had invited him as a courtesy. He was still a shareholder, even if his shares were worthless. He sat in the back corner, silent, diminished. When I finished, board chair Thomas Williams looked at the proposal. "This is unprecedented," Thomas said. "This is fair," I replied. "Morrison Logistics has negative equity. When I started here in 2005, this company was worth $47 million. Over 16 years, the operational improvements I implemented, supply chain optimization, client retention systems, efficiency protocols, took it to $200 million. I added $153 million in value." I paused. Richard destroyed $200 million of that in 3 years. What's left is worth exactly what I'm offering, $1 for the corporate shell, plus assumption of the legitimate operational debts. "But you believe you can rebuild it," Thomas said. "I know I can. I've already done it once." The foundation that Richard's father built in 1970 was solid. The growth I added from 2005 to 2018 was sustainable. What Richard destroyed was capital and reputation, not the underlying operational capacity. Give me 3 to 5 years, and I can take this back to $150 million. Maybe more. Linda, Thomas said, his voice gentler, why do you want to buy a bankrupt company? You have Kali Solutions. You're building something successful. Why take on this burden? Because I've been running Morrison successfully for 16 years without recognition or compensation. Because the clients trust me. Because the employees respect me. Because I know exactly how to fix what's broken. I've been documenting the problems and solutions for 16 years. I paused, looked directly at Richard in the back corner. Richard used to tell me I was on fire when I had ideas he'd take credit for. For 16 years, he praised the fire while stealing the heat, stealing the light, stealing every spark of innovation and claiming it as his own vision. This is a fire sale. I'm buying the company through the same kind of fire Richard always praised. But this time, the fire belongs to me. This time, I'm not the fuel, I'm the force. And that dollar represents exactly what his promises were worth after 16 years. The room was quiet. Thomas broke the silence. Linda, what about the equity Richard promised you? We found documentation, emails, meeting notes about partnership, equity stakes. The 5% he discussed. I'd known this question was coming. Richard planned to give me 0.25%, I said clearly. I have a recording of him discussing it with Nikki Nolan. I also have recordings of him admitting to systematically sabotaging my employment opportunities for over a decade, embezzling hundreds of thousands from this company, and conspiring to keep me economically trapped. I pulled out my laptop, clicked play on a file I'd queued up. Let them hear 30 seconds of the March 2015 recording. Just enough to hear Richard's voice saying she's trapped and doesn't even know the cage is locked. The room went very quiet. 5% of a $200 million company would have been $10 million, I said. Richard promised me partnership equity, verbally, repeatedly, for 16 years, while I added $153 million in value to what his father had built. He planned to give me 0.25% instead, $500,000. A 95% reduction from what he promised. I let that sink in. I don't want equity in Morrison Logistics as it currently exists, I said. I don't want to be a minority stakeholder in a company built on exploitation and fraud. I want to buy it, rebuild it, rename it. I want to create something honest. Something that values competence over manipulation. Something where people are compensated fairly for value they actually create. And when you rebuild it, when I take Morrison back to $150 million or $200 million, it will be 100% mine. Not 5%. Not 0.25%. 100%. That's the difference between being granted equity as a favor and earning ownership through fair acquisition. I looked around the table at the board members, men who'd sat here for years while Richard took credit for my work, while he stole from the company, while he drove it into the ground. You have 4 bids to consider. I've presented ours. Now I need to recuse myself from the decision. Marcus will present the independent analysis, and you'll vote based on what maximizes value to creditors. That's how this should work. I gathered my materials and left the room. I waited in my office for 2 hours. Frank sat with me, neither of us speaking much. Finally, Thomas Williams knocked on my door. The board voted unanimously to recommend your bid to the bankruptcy court, he said. The court hearing is scheduled for September 30th. If the judge approves, and Matthew believes he will, Morrison Logistics is yours. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Thank you. Don't thank me, Thomas said. Thank yourself. You earned this. Richard's father built a good company. You made it great. Richard destroyed it. Now you get to rebuild it and keep what you create. The bankruptcy court hearing was September 30th, 2021. The judge reviewed all 4 bids. Heard testimony from Matthew Blackmore about the process. Questioned me about Kali's operational capacity and financial stability. Asked the other bidders if they had concerns about the process. No one objected. The process had been clean, transparent, competitive. The judge approved the sale. Morrison Logistics, the company I'd grown from $47 million to $200 million over 16 years while someone else took credit, became mine for $1 plus assumption of just $5 million in operational debt. I walked out of that courthouse with acquisition papers in my hand and a company in my name. I found Richard outside the courthouse. He was leaning against the building, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I walked over, stood in front of him. Made him look at me. For everything you built on my stolen ideas, I said quietly. For 16 years of theft. For every time you made me feel invisible while profiting from my brilliance. For every opportunity you destroyed. For every promise you broke. For teaching me that patience is a weapon and documentation is power. He looked at me. His face was gray, his eyes hollow. You planned this, he said, voice hoarse. All of it. The crypto proposal, the encouraging words, letting me destroy myself. I didn't plan anything, I said, and I meant it. I didn't make you invest in Bitcoin at the peak. I didn't make you embezzle $847,000. I didn't make you spend 16 years exploiting me. You did all of that yourself. I just stopped saving you from the consequences of your own choices. I leaned closer. You wanted to invest in Bitcoin? I told you it was innovative thinking. I prepared the analysis you requested, with accurate risk assessment included, by the way, pages 7 and 8, all there in writing. You wanted to embezzle funds? I documented every transaction. You wanted to sabotage my career? I recorded every conversation, saved every journal entry, built something better while you thought I was trapped. I pulled the symbolic dollar bill from my pocket, the one I'd attached to the acquisition proposal. You taught me strategy, Richard. You taught me patience. You taught me how to exploit someone's labor while making them feel valued. You taught me exactly how you think, how you manipulate, how you control. I just learned the lesson better than you taught it. I'm not your victim. I'm your student. And the student has surpassed the teacher. I straightened up, looked down at him one last time. Your father built a good company over 35 years. It was worth $47 million when I started. I took it to $200 million, added $153 million in value through work you claimed as your own. Then you destroyed $200 million of it in 3 years. I'm buying what's left for $1 plus the legitimate debts. But here's what you don't understand, Richard. I added that value once. I can do it again. Except this time, when I rebuild Morrison to $150 million or $200 million, it won't be yours. It will be mine. 100% mine. I folded the dollar bill carefully, put it back in my pocket. Kali destroys evil and ego to make way for transformation. For 16 years, you called me on fire when I had ideas you could steal. Today, I bought your company through a fire sale, the fire you started with your greed and incompetence and moral bankruptcy. Time conquers everything, Richard. And I am time. I turned and walked away. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. Behind me, I heard him start to cry. The criminal case against Richard Morrison concluded in November 2021. His lawyers negotiated a plea deal, felony embezzlement, 3 years in minimum security federal prison. With his connections and expensive legal team, he got club-fed, the kind of white-collar prison that's more like a college dorm with fences and restricted movement. 3 years for stealing $847,000 and destroying the company his father had built. Nikki Nolan faced charges too: conspiracy, accessory to fraud. Her lawyers argued she was manipulated by Richard, that she didn't understand she was facilitating criminal activity, that she was as much a victim as a perpetrator. Plea deal, felony on her record, 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, permanent ban from working in the logistics industry in any capacity. She was 25 when she came to Morrison, hired fresh out of college with her business degree and her polished confidence. 38 now. Her entire adult professional life built at a company where she'd been simultaneously Richard's lover, his spy, and his tool to control me. Now she lived in Columbus, Ohio, with a felony record, working retail at a Target because no professional company would hire her. The logistics industry is smaller than people think. Word travels fast about fraud convictions. I felt no satisfaction in her destruction. Just cold acknowledgement that consequences exist. That choices matter. That you can't weaponize friendship and expect no repercussions. The IPO that was always 18 months away never happened. Morrison Logistics went from a projected IPO valuation of $200 million to a fire sale for $1 in 6 months. And I rebuilt it as Kali Logistics. January 15, 2022. Today would have been Richard's IPO. The date he'd been promising for 16 years. Kali Logistics officially launched today. Press release sent to industry publications. Under new leadership, Kali Logistics rises from Morrison's ashes. New website live. Rebranding complete. New company culture handbook distributed to all employees. Staff retention, 84%. Everyone who wanted to stay, stayed. The 16% who left were part of Richard's old guard, the people who'd benefited from his corruption or couldn't adapt to a culture of transparency and fairness. Leadership structure, me, CEO, Sarah Martinez, COO, Frank, maintains his independent PI firm but serves as strategic advisor and compliance officer. Kaylee, junior associate in strategic planning, she graduated from Harvard last year, earning her place through merit, not nepotism. Financial status, first month showing modest profit. Clients are thrilled, they're finally getting the service quality I've been wanting to provide for 16 years but Richard wouldn't allow because it would cut into his profit margins. Employees are engaged and motivated. We implemented profit sharing, transparent promotion criteria, actual equity for key contributors. Real equity, not promises. The culture is completely different. People are compensated fairly. Ideas are credited accurately. Leadership is earned through competence, not inherited through family connections. We have anonymous feedback channels, regular town halls, open book financial transparency for all employees above manager level. Personal status, 58 years old. Married to a man who treats me as an equal partner. Mother to a daughter who's brilliant and confident in everything I hoped she'd be. CEO of a company valued at $8 million and growing. From executive assistant to CEO. From trapped to free. From invisible to visible. From victim to victor. Time conquered everything. The framed dollar bill hung in my office, Richard's old office, though we completely redecorated. I'd removed the mahogany desk, the intimidation furniture, the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the yard like a throne room. Now it was a working office. Standing desk. Comfortable chairs for meetings. Whiteboards for strategy sessions. And on one wall, a simple black frame containing a $1 bill with a small brass plaque beneath it. Fire sale, September 30, 2021. Kaylee asked about it during her first week as a junior associate. Is that really the dollar you paid for the whole company? That's it. I told Kaylee the full story over Christmas break 2021. Everything. The betrayal, the recordings, the systematic sabotage, the 16 years of patience and documentation. She'd listened in silence, occasionally wiping tears from her eyes, then hugged me fiercely. I'm so sorry you went through that, she said. And so proud of how you handled it. Why $1? She asked now, studying the frame. Because that's what his promises were worth. What Nikki's friendship was worth. What 16 years of manipulation and exploitation deserved. I looked at the dollar bill. Also because Richard used to say I was on fire when I had ideas he'd steal. This is from the fire sale. My fire. The fire that burned down his lies and built something honest from the ashes. Finally mine. Kaylee smiled. Kali, the goddess of time. You waited 16 years. You were time itself. Time and fire, I agreed. Patient but unstoppable. Destructive but transformative. I destroyed what was corrupt and built what's honest. That's what Kali does. Are you happy now? After everything? I thought about that question. Thought about 16 years of being invisible, of watching mediocre men profit from my brilliance, of Nikki's fake friendship and Richard's false promises. Thought about the recording that changed everything. About Frank, who'd helped me understand my worth. About Sarah, who'd never forgotten our interview and jumped at the chance to build something real. About Kaylee, confident and brilliant, starting her career in a company that valued competence over connections. I'm not happy about the time it took, I said honestly. Or the betrayal. Or the years I spent feeling trapped and invisible. But I'm satisfied with the outcome. Richard's in prison. Nikki's in Ohio with a felony record. Morrison Logistics is dead. And Collie's alive, built on honesty instead of theft, partnership instead of exploitation, fairness instead of manipulation. You taught them a lesson. I taught them that time catches everyone. That documentation matters. That patience isn't weakness, it's strategy. That the person you underestimate might be the person who documents your downfall and buys your company for $1. I pulled out my current journal, bright yellow, like flames, and opened to a blank page. January 15, 2022. Today would have been Richard's IPO. Instead, Collie Logistics is valued at $8 million from a $1 fire sale 4 months ago. Richard is in federal prison in Pennsylvania, minimum security but still prison. Eating cafeteria food, sharing a room, doing laundry, following rules. He's 54 years old, and he'll be 56 when he gets out. If he gets out early for good behavior. Nikki is in Columbus, Ohio, working retail at Target with a felony record. She can't work in logistics, can't rebuild the career she spent 13 years building at Morrison. She's 38 years old, starting over with nothing. Catherine Morrison is in Connecticut with the house. It was in her name, the only asset that survived Richard's bankruptcy, and the kids. Building a life without Richard. She sent me a card last month. Short, simple, thank you for telling the truth. I didn't know what she meant at first, then realized she'd heard the recording. Thomas Williams had played it for her during the divorce proceedings to prove Richard's character. She'd spent 20 years married to a man who was exploiting everyone around him. The recording freed her too. And I'm here, in this office where I was invisible for 16 years, finally visible. Kaylee asked yesterday if it was worth it. 16 years of patience, of documentation, of strategic suffering. If I would do it again knowing what I know now. I told her what I believe, success isn't about winning once. It's about becoming the kind of person who can't be kept invisible anymore. That transformation doesn't happen in a moment of triumph. It happens in 16 years of journals, of strategic planning, of refusing to let other people's blindness define your value. Richard taught me strategy. Nikki taught me that friendship requires verification. Frank taught me that being seen is a gift. Sarah taught me that people remember. They remember who you were before the system broke you, and they'll help you become that again. Kaylee taught me that everything I endured mattered because she gets to start from a different place than I did. The journals are complete. 35 of them now, all vibrant colors, all filled with evidence that became justice. They sit on a shelf in my home office, a rainbow of documentation. Sometimes I flip through them, reading my younger self's voice, seeing how I changed from hopeful to resigned to strategic to dangerous. Time has conquered. Note to self, frame that Oprah productivity advice. Document your day consistently, it makes you 43% more effective at achieving your goals. She was right. My goal was justice. The documentation made it possible. Also note, take Frank to dinner this weekend. Thanks Sarah for taking a chance on Collie. Tell Kaylee I'm proud of her. Visit the Vermont house, I bought it last month, the vacation property Richard lost in his bankruptcy. It's beautiful. Kaylee, Frank and I are planning to spend Christmas there. The irony feels good sometimes. Final note, stop calling these notes to self. After 16 years and 35 journals, I know exactly who I'm talking to. It's me. Consistently me. The version that stayed visible even when the world insisted I was invisible. The version that documented truth even when no one wanted to hear it. The version that turned patience into power and time into justice. I am Kali. Destroyer of obstacles. Protector of truth. Time itself. And time has conquered everything. 3 years later, Kali Logistics had grown from $8 million to $67 million in valuation with no debt. We'd acquired one smaller logistics company, expanded into specialized freight, and built a reputation for ethical practices and employee satisfaction. The IPO Richard had promised for 16 years was now scheduled for September 2025, except this time, it was real. And this time, when we went public, every employee who'd been with us for more than a year would get actual equity. Real shares. Not promises. Thank you for listening to Linda's story. A $2.79 composition notebook. An Oprah productivity tip. 16 years of patience. And one accidentally recorded phone call that changed everything. Linda Harris bought a company for $1 that she'd already built once, grew it from $47 million to $200 million while someone else took the credit, the profit, and the glory. When Richard Morrison destroyed it through greed and stupidity, she bought the ashes for $1 plus $5 million in operational debt. 3 years later. $67 million valuation. IPO scheduled. Every employee gets real equity, not promises. Now Richard Morrison is 56, working warehouse management in Pennsylvania with a felony record. Nikki Nolan is in Ohio, working retail at Target, her 13-year logistics career dead because trust matters and she weaponized friendship for a paycheck. And Linda. Linda is CEO. Her name is on the door. Her company. Her rules. Her fire. One last thing, that quiet person you're exploiting. The one you think needs you. They don't. They're just waiting, documenting. Building their exit while you mistake their patience for weakness. And by the time you realize what's happening, they'll be buying your company for $1. Time conquers everything. Especially when you're paying attention. This is Karma Café. I'm Makosi McIntosh. Keep your receipts, trust your gut, and remember, the cage is only locked if you don't have the key. They're not trapped. They're documenting. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. Let me know what you think in the comments, and tell me where you're listening from.